Welcome to episode 7 of Switching Screens. As always, I'm Anthony Doyle. With me is Josh Howe. And today we have Will Muckian with us, who is an NBA writer, who is also a Chicago Bulls fan. And I've known Will for 3 or 4 years now, I think. We wrote together at Holyfield. So I have witnessed his suffering through many bad Bulls seasons.
To put it lightly, yeah.
So we were talking before we started recording. This year, it feels like there's been more drama over the All-Star selections in years past. It just came out 2 days ago, and we've already had like Devin Booker calling the whole process political and saying it's not the best players anymore. Zach LaVine coming out and saying there aren't 12 guys in the Eastern Conference having better seasons than him. We've had Jackson Hayes and Terrence Davis and a couple of other guys comment about being left out of the Rising Stars game. And it's weird to me because I don't remember players being that upset about it before.
Yeah, I mean, like we were talking about a little bit before, I think part of it is there was this preseason perception, especially in the Eastern Conference, that in terms of all-star berths, the door was kind of wide open for guys who had missed out in years past. And when those guys are still missing out, in part because their teams are still bad, it creates this sort of culture, I think, within the losing teams where it's like, well, we always get passed over for guys that maybe aren't doing as much on a winning team. But I think that's sort of a misleading point of view.
Yeah, for the All-Star game itself, there's 3 guys who I want to touch on who were really mentioned. And, it's Devin Booker, Zach LaVine, and Bradley Beal. And for all 3 of them, the argument was basically guys who score as much as those 3 guys do make the All-Star game. That's basketball history. And it's not really wrong, but each of those 3 guys, I think Booker has the best case for being upset. But I've talked to a bunch of guys at Suns Twitter about this, and I don't think Booker got left out because he wasn't one of the 12 best players. I think he got left out because they still do positional All-Star selections.
Yeah. Yeah, I think especially when it gets to the reserves, the positional sort of restrictions become so silly and frivolent that I can understand Booker being upset. I do think he was better than actually probably one of the guards I might have left out. But yeah, no, I don't know why in an era where everybody talks about positionless basketball, we would keep it for something as meaningless as the All-Star game.
Would you be referring to a Houston guard?
I might be. Yeah.
I was going to come right out and say it. I don't think Westbrook should be on there. But I was going to add that, I think some of that stuff, and Westbrook specifically in this case, is reputation-based. I think that still plays a fairly significant factor. I think the coaches, did a pretty good job with the reserves. And I think they usually do a pretty good job. But, yeah, stuff like that, I mean, I would have had Booker in over Westbrook, and I don't know. Maybe there's some recency bias too, because Westbrook's been pretty good lately, but he started off the season, not good. The vast majority of the season hasn't been very good.
Right.
And even when he's been better, statistically, they haven't been winning. So
he's still at 52% true shooting for the season.
Yeah, it's bad. I mean, he's not efficient, but that's not new. He hasn't been efficient for a long time.
Yeah, right. I kind of wonder, too, if him being a past All-Star MVP plays into it at all in terms of just, he's had so much success, whatever that means at the All-Star level in this game. We have to keep bringing him back for entertainment value. Yeah, I think that plays a big role in it.
And I think for coaches also, Westbrook's a guy you've had to game plan for
sure,
almost a decade now. So for a lot of these coaches, he's a guy who they've got into the room to prepare for year after year, and there's a lot of built-up respect there that is hard to sort of put aside.
Yeah, he's also one of those guys that his game screams all-star. He's fun, right? He's explosive. Yeah. He's just a guy you want to have in that game. And then you get into, what kind of all-stars are you looking for? Are you looking for the entertainment? Are you looking for the guys that really deserve to be there, that maybe their game isn't as flashy? Thinking about guys like Al Horford last year, stuff like that. And that's always a bit of a wishy-washy sort of debate for me because I honestly would prefer the All-Star game to be full of just guys who are there for fun. And yeah, you want to have the guys who are doing, the best to, and should be able to go, that like they have, played a good season. But at the same time, I think there should be more emphasis on the fun if the All-Star game didn't matter, but it does. And as long as it matters, then, so should the selections.
Well, and that's the thing. Like every time we talk about a player who just retired, the first thing we say is how many times were they an All-Star? You read Kobe tributes this week. How many of them started with 18-time All-Star?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Between that and rings, I think it's like the two things we use to define a player's career, right or wrong. I think most of us here know that it's probably not the best way to do things, but it remains sort of a fact of NBA discussion that it factors so heavily into somebody's legacy.
Rudy Gobert missing out last year, whether we like his reaction or not, that mattered to the way he was perceived around the league because people like making fun of Rudy Gobert, and I think Utah Jazz fans kind of bring a little of that on themselves, but these things do matter, and I think they should move the rosters up to 13 or 14 players, probably. I mean, we have 13-man rosters for regular NBA teams. Why not add a spot for the All-Star game? It lets you get a couple more guys in. But yeah, I agree. Booker should have been there. I would have had him. If it wasn't for positions, I would have had him over Ingram, and I know Ingram fans already don't like me, but...
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Ingram's still not the most egregious to me, but I understand, like, bumping him off for Booker. I don't want to reduce it to, like, Booker just dunk more, but I do feel like, playing into what you were saying, Josh, about just, I mean, Russ has that tailor-made game for the All-Star appearance where he's got the dunks and he's got the the explosion, and Devin Booker, I think, almost suffers from having this reputation as a jump shooter, justified or unjustified. I think that also hampers his All-Star chances a little bit.
And people don't watch the Suns very often, so a lot of people don't know that Booker has really changed his offensive profile this year. He's taking less of the bad shots. And he's shooting 75% at the rim this year.
That to me is the crazy part of things, is just not just how frequently he's gotten to the rim, but how well he's performed once he gets there.
So I think if the Suns didn't have all those injuries happen, if Ayton doesn't get suspended, if Baines doesn't miss a whole bunch of games, and they stay relatively good, he's definitely in there. But they did have all the injury trouble. They fell off quite a bit, and like it or not, it brings back a lot of those sentiments about people feeling like Booker's an empty stats guy, and I've felt that way in the past. I don't think that's true this year. I think this year he has been a much better player than he's been in past years.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that everything, analytically lines up with that as well, that he's not just an empty calories guy, like you're saying.
Well, for the two Eastern Conference guys I brought up, I'll start with Beal. He's statistically the worst defender in the entire NBA this year. He's lasted the entire league in both DPIPM and DRAPM. And, if you watch the Wizards, Bradley Beal does not care about defense this year.
Yeah.
No, he shouldn't either.
And it's a lot easier to score a lot of points when you're on a team where you can shoot as often as you want and you don't have to play the other end of the floor, and that's what he's doing this year. He's fun to watch offensively, but he's not playing good basketball, I don't think.
Yeah, I would agree. He's a guy that's been susceptible to getting back cut and has his poor off-ball awareness has always been a factor. But when you have that in conjunction with really not caring, and everyone on that Wizards team, I think, has kind of just accepted that they're going to be historically bad defensively. I mean, you may as well have fun with it, I guess, but you also don't get to get mad when you don't make the All-Star team, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And they are a lot of fun. I turn on Wizards games all the time just to watch the absurd scoring totals.
Yeah.
constant fast breaks. They're fun to watch, but
Yep.
sorry.
High scoring, good defense. It's basically an all-star game every time you watch the Wizards.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's playing 82 All-Star games this year. Why does he need another one? So the last guy will go to your guy, Will, Zach Levine. And Levine was pretty upset about not making the All-Star game. And
Yeah.
I mean, let's start with the positive. His scoring numbers are gaudy this year. Like, he has put up some really incredible offensive performances at times.
Yeah, and I'll give him credit where credit is due. As a shooter, his profile this year has been really great. I think for the most part, he's made better decisions than he was making his first few years with the Bulls. Um, but and I do think, again, to his credit, that his post All-Star, interview was really mature. Given things that we've seen from other players, I thought that he handled it really well. But the quote that you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast about, I don't think there's 12 guys in the East who had a better season than me, I took a little exception to that. By my count, I think there are 18. I can break it down divisionally. Some of them are all-stars. Some of them are not. Maybe I'll hold off on that for the time being. But I don't think that his snub is really as drastic as a lot of Bulls fans make it seem. Yes, it would have been cool to have a Chicago representative in the All-Star game. I think from where I'm sitting, it would have been a little cheap, too. It would have felt like we got the representative only because we were the city hosting the game. Levine has been the offensive fulcrum, I think, for the Bulls, but that isn't saying a whole lot because they don't accomplish a whole lot offensively. He's just sort of he's your classic high usage guy whose actual sort of performance gets overblown because he's the one finishing a lot of plays.
And the Bulls have had a ton of injuries this year, and they aren't really competing a lot. So it feels like when I watch them, there's a lot of meaningless minutes where somebody's just has to eat usage.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think there's probably a better argument. Interestingly, I may be off on this. I think there's a better argument for Levine if Otto Porter stays healthy, just because I think you get a lot more functional basketball, and you don't have all these possessions where, like you said, Levine is just swallowing possession because no one else on that team is equipped to do it.
Yeah, and I want to touch on Otto Porter when we get to the trade deadline stuff because I've seen his name come up from a few different people. But yeah, is there anybody aside from those three guys that you guys have either heard noise about them not making it or feel like should have been there?
Not really. No.
No.
There was
No.
a Giannis tweet about Eric Bledsoe, but
Yeah. Bledsoe was one of the guys on my list that I said probably was having a better season than Zach Levine. But I mean, I think him or Brogdon, there's an argument for over Levine. Just speaking of guards specifically in Levine's own division, those guys, I don't think it's very egregious because you're always going to have to accept that people are going to miss out who are on the fringe, and the nature of the fringe is that people will occupy that area.
My thing with Bledsoe is he's only playing like 26 minutes per game this season. It's like he's playing good basketball, but he's also kind of been he's scoring a lot, but he's also kind of been a role player for the Bucks in that their whole roster construction is just moving pieces around Giannis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they are a dominant team right now, I would say, and not that you should award, meaningless all-star berths to people who happen to be on a good team, but I do think Bledsoe's a really important part of what they're doing. Lopez is a really important part of what they're doing, and just because they're role players, I wouldn't say that they're undeserving of all-star, at least recognition to some extent, being in that conversation.
That's reasonable, yeah.
Yeah. I heard a little bit about Jaylen Brown, but not too much because there are two Celtics going. But I heard from a lot of people that they had difficulty, between Tatum, or I guess not really Tatum. Most people were down on Tatum, but Kemba and Brown, I heard some mixed things between those two, even though Kemba's the one who ended up starting, but obviously he's the face and a more popular player. Not that he's been bad this season, but, you know, they ended up going. It's kind of that coin flip thing as well that, like, I guess Brown you could make an argument for, but I think they probably got the two that make the most sense. But, you know, and I think Brown will probably be an all-star in the future. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
The first episode of the show, we had Max Carlin, who's a Celtics writer, on, and I know he feels pretty strongly about the whole Tatum versus Brown thing, and I know it comes up a lot, but
Tatum's been great this.
Like, Jaylen Brown's a good player. I think Tatum is a clearly better player.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to provide convincing evidence the other direction. Specifically, I mean, even this year, in a year that Brown's really come into his own, he's not in the same stratosphere as Tatum.
No.
And if Tatum's finishing at the rim ever comes around, it'll be even more clear.
Yeah.
So the one I left till the end is the whole thing. When we talked about Levine, Booker, and Beal, we kind of talked about them being on bad teams and that being part of why they got left out. And the counter argument I keep seeing on Twitter to that one is, well, what about Trey? And to me, there's two things about Trey Young. First of all, he didn't get in the same way those guys did.
Right.
Starters are different rules, and that means that you can't compare him making the All-Star team to those guys making the All-Star team. Secondly, like, Trey's numbers are stupid. So even if he's a bad defender on a bad team, like, his numbers are something different than those other guys.
Yeah, I think it's one thing to say a guy's having a good offensive season on a bad team and he doesn't, he deserved to get in. It's a different thing when a guy is having, I mean, what I feel comfortable deeming a historically good offensive season from Trey. Again, like you said, he got in on the fan vote, but I would have wanted the coaches to vote him in regardless, simply because of how impressive he's been. I don't think the difference between, I think, usage-consuming guys like Levine and somebody like Trey, who obviously still thrives on a lot of usage on that Hawks team, is that Hawks team absolutely requires him to go and to function. And I'm not sure that replacing Levine with somebody else would have adverse effects. It's not like he brings a whole lot outside of finishing a play for the Bulls.
To Josh's earlier point, too, Trey is fun.
Yeah.
And that's, like...
Yes.
That's a big part of it, is, like, you tune in to watch the Atlanta Hawks this year just because of Trey.
Yeah. Only because of him. I do get it, though, like, some of the argument for all the losses and stuff, too, because Trey is a bad defender. Like, he's fantastic on one side of the ball and not on the other at all. So I get it. Like, I personally wouldn't have had Trey starting if I was, voting for the All-Stars. Not sure if I'd have him in there as a reserve, but definitely not starting. I probably would have had either Ben Simmons or Kyle Lowry starting. But, yeah, I mean, like, I get it. Like, I get why he's in, and they're all the same reasons that we've already talked about and the reasons that it probably will continue to be forever, because that's the way the All-Star game works. So, I mean, it is what it is. I don't have a real big problem with it because I think he is, fun, and the numbers are, on one side of the ball anyway, really, really, really good.
Yeah, when the Raptors played the Hawks the other night, they targeted Trey repeatedly, both on ball and off ball.
Yeah.
And they created a lot of buckets doing that. It is what it is with him defensively. I don't think he's ever going to be that much more than he is at that end, but he's a transcendent offensive player, and if you can build the right roster around him, I think you can still turn that into a reasonable competitor.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the Lowry thing, I mean, we could finish the episode talking about the ways that people think Lowry's underrated. And I'm sure I think we've probably talked about that on every episode.
That sounds like an Anthony Doyle podcast, yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of people who were mad that Lowry got put on the All-Star team. He absolutely belongs there. You have to watch the Raptors play basketball, or you won't understand it. But if you watch the Raptors, it's impossible not to see why he should be there.
Those are the same people that wanted Derrick Rose on the All-Star team. So
yeah,
just
you gotta hit mute and move on. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will's a Chicago guy, so Will and I have had our share of Derrick Rose conversations in the past.
Yes. Yeah, I don't miss having to have them.
Let's move on to the Rising Stars stuff. I want to say, first of all, it's weird to me that Trey and Luka are playing in Rising Stars.
Yeah, agreed.
Like, I think if a guy is starting in the All-Star game, they should give that spot to somebody else in Rising Stars, but I also think on the international team this year, filling that spot would have been hard. Like, the guys towards the end of that international Rising Stars team this year are not that impressive names. Like,
yeah.
Svi is not a bad player.
Jumps out.
Mo Wagner is not a bad player, but like those guys shouldn't be playing in Rising Stars.
Mm-hmm.
On the American side, I mean, Jackson Hayes kind of made his comment about, F the NBA.
Yeah.
Kendrick Perkins tweeted about our guy Terrence Davis, said he absolutely belonged. I agree with him, but I talked to a few people about it, and I kind of came to the point of it's Rising Stars. It doesn't really matter. Nobody's going to remember who played there next year.
Right, yeah. And Davis probably has a good shot at getting into the roster next year anyway.
Yeah. The one other thing that I found funny was just Zion being an injury replacement.
Yeah.
He's played 96 minutes.
I mean, nobody's going to disagree that he deserves to be on the team, certainly, but it's funny that he's finally healthy and he gets thrown right in.
I know why they put him in there. People are going to, there's going to be people who wouldn't otherwise watch Rising Stars who will tune in because Zion's playing.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's probably going to do something absolutely stupid that breaks the laws of physics during the game.
Like he did, last night with that lob? So, yeah, I'd expect a little bit more of that.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any issues with the Rising Stars roster? Is this something you
guys are
interested of talking about?
I mean, I'm a little bummed that the only bull to make it was Wendell. Obviously, he won't be able to play because he's injured again. I'm bummed that he is probably not someone who will ever become an all-star, so I would have liked to see him get that chance at Rising Stars in that similar environment to kind of show off some of the things that make him unique and maybe make Jim Boylan think, oh, this guy can do that, or this guy can do this. And instead, we're just going to be using him as a post-up threat for the end of time. So that's a little bit of a bummer. I'm happy Kobe White didn't make it. I don't think he deserved it, and he would have shot 20% in a game that has no defense, and I don't need to see that. So aside from that, no, those are my only two comments on the Rising Stars game.
It was really funny at the beginning of the season when Kobe White was having those huge scoring outburst games, and people were like, this is it. The Bulls found their future all-star scoring guy, and a lot of draft Twitter was kind of like, just wait.
Right. Yeah. It'll change, and you'll see all of the reasons that we didn't have him in the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
I guess if we're done talking about the All-Star stuff, let's talk a little bit about the Bulls.
All right.
Wendell is such 2018 was a good draft. I still think he might end up being one of the 4 or 5 best players out of that draft. I really believe in his talent.
Yeah, and it's been frustrating this year. I follow a fair amount of Bulls fans, not too many for my own sanity, but I follow enough guys by virtue of having written for Pippen Ain't Easy a few different times. I follow some of their writers there, and I've had to see so many people who are just like, yeah, dude, Wendell, I don't know, I think he should be benched and we should start Gafford full time. And it's hard to describe how frustrating that is. Or I've seen guys that are like, he can't play center full time, he's too small, he should be a power forward. Mm-hmm. A world where I have to watch Wendell Carter play power forward next to Daniel Gafford is a world that I don't want to be around for. it's frustrating because not only do the coaches obviously not know how to use him, but a lot of Bulls fans don't seem to have any reason or don't seem to have any grasp on why he hasn't flourished. They just see a center who doesn't dunk very much, hasn't really had any highlight-worthy blocks since he stuffed Russell Westbrook at the rim last year, and they think, well, Daniel Gafford jumps 40 inches in the air. That's a good thing. And so, yeah, it's frustrating because I think a lot of fans are just like, they feed into this whole Gafford thing, and I'm worried it's going to lead somewhere where we just dump Wendell and hail Gafford as the spirit guy that Jim Boylan has been seeking this whole time.
You know what he reminds me a little bit about, and maybe Josh can speak to this. It reminds me a little bit about the first 2 years of Jonas Valanciunas, where the Raptors didn't really know how to use him.
Yeah.
And a lot of fans turned on him as a high draft pick because the team wasn't like they had him bulk up one year and then he was too slow the next year, so everybody was going, "Oh, he needs to slim down." And it was like the first couple of years of him was a lot of just like nobody really knew what to do with him, but the advanced numbers kept being really, really good. And Anna Jane Smith from Raptors Twitter, who I'm sure Josh knows really well.
Yeah.
She tweeted a little bit about Wendell a while back, where she was saying like what she wanted to see the Bulls do is use him out of the high post more. Let him play make.
Please.
Yeah.
If you and I was encouraged to go back and look for film of him operating out of the high post in college and a little bit in the NBA. He's really smart playing out of the high post. Like he's a really smart basketball player. But,
yeah, I mean, his processing is a lot quicker than I think most bigs have at his age, which is really important for him hitting tight windows and being able to operate effectively out of that high post area. And I don't know that he's like just outright. He was touted as this super intellectual prospect, and I do think he's really smart. But really, I just think that the processing speed for him is fast, and he doesn't necessarily see the floor in a special way, but he's able to understand when he needs to make a move at a certain time, and just being able to kind of fundamentally know that, whether it's instinctually or it is actually an IQ thing, and he's understanding the game in that capacity, is so important. And you talked about the Jonas Valanciunas thing, and that actually reminded me of a different Bulls player. I feel like every year I hear Lauri Markkanen put on 15 more pounds, and every year he gets worse and worse at all of the things that he was likable for his rookie season, just because the Bulls are like, we want to be able to post him up a lot more. And he's not that kind of player. He was never that kind of player. He was a player who, at 7 feet tall, could shoot off a little bit of movement. He was a little quicker than like your average sort of power forward center guy, and he could bring the ball up on occasion. None of those situations require added muscle, but for some reason he's gone back to the drawing board every year and said, "This is what I need to improve on. My post hook needs to get better. My footwork in the post needs to get better. All these things that." There are two young stars who I actually believe in on the Bulls, and neither of them are being used or harnessed properly.
I went back a little while ago and looked at Markkanen's numbers over his first 3 seasons, and what really struck me is like they haven't changed.
No, yeah. He's stagnated.
There's no growth in his game for what was 3 years ago touted as one of the best young players in the league, and part of that, I think, is just organizational. It seems like the Bulls are a rudderless ship a lot of the time. Like, as somebody who watches them really closely, does it ever seem to you like they really know what they want to be doing?
No. In the short answer, I think a virtue of them making LaVine, not just in name but functionally, their number one guy, is that a lot of other players get left out in the cold because he's not a natural playmaker. A lot of Bulls fans will cite his assists without really citing the efficiency in his assists or the fact that as the primary ball handler, 5 assists a game is not very good. So I think that they want to funnel stuff through Zach, right or wrong. And it's getting to the point where I think nearly every Bulls writer, Casey Johnson, who is by far the highest profile Bulls writer in the league, has called for increased market and touches in practically every game. And it feels like we don't ever see those changes. We certainly haven't seen Wendell used like he was in college. And I don't think the Bulls do understand what they have. Boylan is really buying into his, high line of defense, and that's inflated their numbers in some deceptive ways, as a lot of writers have delved into. But I think there's just a lot of sort of smoke and mirrors going on, whether intentionally or unintentionally, I'm not totally sure. But they don't know what they have, but they think they have something very good, and it's not the players that I think are very good. So I'm as confused, I think, as a lot of people are who aren't Bulls fans.
I was just looking at this, and Jim Boylan and Nick Nurse have been NBA head coaches for about the same number of games.
Don't ever say that.
Boylan's coached 109 games. Nurse has coached 131 games. Their records are a little bit different.
Yeah, a fair bit, yeah.
It's funny. Like, you look at maximizing players is never as easy as I think some people think it is, and it really depends, right? Like, because people want to try different things. It's one of the things that I've come to really respect and appreciate about Nick Nurse, because he's willing to do it constantly, to try these different things and to put players into different scenarios to see how they react to them. And then usually by the end, he likes to keep trying different things, but usually by the end, he knows what they're best at, even if it was something that, he hadn't seen early on to know whether they were good at it or not. And then he'll put them in those scenarios to succeed at the end, which is super useful. I mean, like, say what you will about McCaw, we all have said things passionately. But I swear, when Nick Nurse was like, I'm going to put the ball in his hands more, I almost lost my mind, because I was like, that is the worst decision. He turns the ball over so much, and he's like, but I'm only going to do it when he's in transition and bringing up the ball. Turns out that was a good idea. He's pretty good at that. So Nurse writes that down and goes, okay, I know he's good at this. So he can do that later, whether it's in a smaller role or whatever, once everybody's healthy and stuff like that, hopefully. But like that, those sorts of things, those aren't like, not everybody does that. I think that's something that needs to be like talked about more in terms of coaching. Like, I think people don't really look at like how they just look at like either this player's succeeding or he's not. And there's so much more to it than that, and obviously more to it than just coaching as well, because the organization tells coaches like, here's what we think of this guy. You need to work with this guy. We like this guy a lot. We're not going to move him. We are going to move him. All that stuff. So it all feeds down into that. But I think that's something that teams are more stubborn about a lot of the time than maybe they should be. Like we're talking about here with the Bulls, and it's kind of frustrating.
I very much think it's a top-down organization thing. And when you look at like the Raptors since Masai started running things, you look at the player everybody talks about, Pascal Siakam, and how he's developed. And I think back to that first season where Dwayne Casey started him for his first 34 games, but he couldn't functionally do anything except defend and like dunk in transition. And then they sent him down to the G League, and at that time, like, as Raptors fans watching Pascal Siakam in those first 34 games, you were terrified every time he put the ball on the floor. He was just not good at dribbling a basketball.
Mm-hmm.
But they sent him down to the G League. They put the ball in his hands in the G League, and they said, like, we see this as something he can develop. And they kept pounding that principle that this is something he's going to develop. This is the development plan for Pascal Siakam, and this is where we see him going in the future. And that, like, now you look back and you can see a 4-year plan that they had in place to develop him into. They probably didn't see him developing into this guy, but to develop him in this direction.
Yeah.
And you need that whole organizational plan where everybody's on the same page about where you're trying to get a player to. And when I look at a bad team like the Bulls, I don't see that, because I don't see that everybody's on the same page of where they're trying to get the player to.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you talk about kind of this 4-year plan, and organizational patience, I think, is so important when you're building a team that you want to be a playoff contender. And we've never seen the Bulls really full-time commit to a rebuild. They wanted the rebuild to last 1 year and to be back in the playoffs the next. They wanted to be in the playoffs this year. We can be pretty confident now that's not going to happen. If it does happen, I'll actually kind of be more disappointed than if they miss, because it's going to ratify a lot of the mistakes that I think they've made as successes. But they've never really said, okay, we're going to accept that we're going to fail for this long, but we're going to take time with it. We want our guys to get better, not just, oh, well, when we come back in the summer, our guys will be better. No, that's not how that works. Like you're talking about, you have to have sort of a structure. You have to have a plan. They've hardly used the Windy City Bulls for any sort of development aspect. They sent Spencer Dinwiddie down there, and now he's really good. He doesn't play for our team, but he's really good. And so, to me, that's like you have this organizational opportunity. You've sent Cristiano Felicio, who might just be broken. That might just be one that we got to give up on. You sent Chandler Hutchinson down there, who has come back and had some really good minutes now recently for the Bulls. Why haven't you sent Wendell down there? Why didn't you send Chris Dunn down there earlier on in his career? There's really no good answer for that. These guys need confidence. They need to know that the things they did in college are still things that they can execute. And just to learn that their strengths are still options, but the Bulls team doesn't play to their strengths.
They did one really good thing in the last couple of years that I will give them a lot of credit for. The Otto Porter trade was a great move for the Bulls front office. And, they found a guy who was being undervalued on his team, a guy who people thought of as a bad contract, who really wasn't a bad contract. And they traded assets that really weren't that interesting to get that player. And that was good, and that to me was a sign that maybe the Bulls had an idea of what they're doing. But then, this past summer, the Thad Young signing, when they did that, was weird to me. Because their best young players are bigs.
Yeah, and I get if you want to use Thad Young as sort of we'll throw this in as these are funky lineups, and it's nice to have a bit part player who you can create those sort of funk lineups with. You can throw him in there with Wendell if you want to create some, defensively havoc-wreaking team, or you can throw Lowry at center and try to create some super small ball team. Mm-hmm. But they never really committed to Lowry at center for any substantial amount of minutes. They never really used Thad Young in a whole lot of sequences with the starters. So the signings, both him and Satoransky, I thought were really good signings at the time, but again, you're relying on an organization that has shown time and time again they don't know how to use players to use a player like Thad Young well. And that didn't happen. And I don't know why I was surprised that it didn't happen, but that's just spending good money, making good trades means nothing if you can't use the players the way that they're best used.
So, to move to the trade deadline stuff. The last couple of weeks... Move to the trade deadline stuff. Oh, I gotta get a little bit of echo there. We've had guys who cover, teams at the top of the league on, and a lot of them have been lamenting the fact that moving towards the trade deadline, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of sellers. The Bulls are a team who really could maybe take advantage of that because,
should probably take advantage of that, yeah.
You talk about Satoransky, you talk about Thad Young, you talk about Otto Porter, depending on where they stand on him. They have some guys who could really help teams. And there are teams who might be desperate to buy. Do you think the Bulls are going to be active on that front, or does the front office seem to you to be pretty set on holding on to these guys for their development?
I would feel more confident in them selling on Thad Young and probably trying to milk way too much value out of him and then ending up not trading him. But I would believe them trying to move him more than I would Satoransky, in part because if you take Satoransky out of this Bulls lineup, there's no one that can draw up a play. And I think they're at least at some level aware of that. That Dunn is, especially if he's injured for long term after he left yesterday's Nets game with a knee injury of undisclosed severity. Where does this direction come? You can talk all you want about trying to transition Kobe White into a full-time point guard role. I would rather shoot myself in the eyes with nails. But Satoransky is a player who I know I want to keep long-term if the Bulls draft a true point guard in this upcoming draft, which is a great draft to be looking for a point guard. I think having a veteran around like Satoransky who can help that point guard transition would be really valuable. I do think they may be selling on Denzel Valentine as well. Valentine's been really good by advanced metrics, probably better than he's been any other year of his career. And that's on small minutes, granted. But his defensive buy-in has been really interesting to watch for a guy who was kind of a turnstile in years past. He's not happy here. The Bulls seemingly just refuse to play him outright. He's behind practically every other wing or guard in the entire team, for better or for worse. For worse, if you ask me. And I know he's made his displeasure pretty clear. I would expect them to move on from him because that lines up with sort of the rotational gist of things. You know, him not getting minutes and his displeasure just maybe overpowering the Bulls front office and making them make a move.
I look at the Bulls roster. I always think about guys like Archie Diacono and Cornette who have gone off versus the Raptors in the past, but they seem to just kind of be lost pieces on that roster right now. Yeah. I mean, Cornette is a guy that another signing I was really excited about, but with this whole high line thing, I mean, he's not going to function in that. He doesn't have the foot speed to show and recover to the degree that somebody like Wendell can, or to some extent Gafford could do. You use him as a stretch guy, and you use him as an at-the-rim, presence defensively. You don't use him switching. You don't use him in space. He certainly doesn't have that agility or that flexibility to do that. So I don't even know what the market would be like for somebody like Cornette. He's on a super friendly deal, but I'm not sure I see the Bulls moving him because he is so cheap to have around, and they kind of need a center in any sort of aspect at all right now. In your ideal world, what would you want the Bulls to be looking for back if they were looking to move some of those guys?
Picks. I don't trust this team at all, but I trust them more with picks, more with them being dumb enough to get lucky with a pick than I do them taking back a current player in a trade.
That makes sense, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Do you, on a front office level, do you have any hope for the organization figuring things out? Or making
it feels like this is the first year, and I said this at the beginning of the season, when they did their beginning of the season presser. This was the first year where I was like, okay, they made a concrete promise to make the playoffs. This time there's real accountability. In the past they were like, we just want to see improvement, and that's such a nebulous term that you can define that as anything. We saw something that we liked. But this was the first year where they had a material goal, and they failed. And they didn't just fail a little bit. As far as we can tell right now, they are failing pretty dramatically in terms of their desire to make the playoffs. They made playoff-facing signings in Satoransky and Young, and one of those signings didn't even last the full season without wanting to leave, and they aren't in the playoff picture. So, I mean, it feels like every year I'm like, this is the year they get fired, because every year they do something so drastically dumb that I'm like, this is the year they get fired. But I think unless Reinsdorf is killed in a tragic accident, there's no way that Gar Forman and John Paxson are really going to lead that organization. It's worth mentioning Paxson has sort of assumed all of the power at the top of that organization. Forman is basically just in a scouting role now by all accounts. So he's not so much the problem. It's John Paxson and trying to do the same things he's been doing for the past 15 years.
And I would ask your opinion on Jim Boylan, but I kind of know where you stand on him. I think it's where most Bulls fans.
It's not worth listening to words. I mean, he's a bonehead. It's known. I think every Bulls fan at this point, even the kind of your Facebook group Bulls fans, the kind I'm talking about. They're very over the whole Boylan thing. No one at this point is of the mind that he's the guy for the job. I know. I mean, I wrote something right when Hoiberg got fired. They never gave him a fair shake, and they wanted to go with a guy who was an organizational sycophant. They got it. He's not smart. He has good assistants this year, and I think that they've been maybe more influential than we realize, but they've not been enough to bail him out from some really just mind-blowingly bad games from Boylan's perspective. So, yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that, because I could go on for 30 minutes about the the problem that he presents to this organization, but I won't.
As a non-Bulls fan, I just have to say he is a phenomenal quote.
Yeah, you can go to him for anything. I would love for them to ask him about, real philosophy and religion and really just open up the chestnut that is Jim Boylan's shiny skull.
On a general trade deadline note, like we're what, 5 days away now from the deadline?
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, are we really? It snuck up on me.
It has been so quiet, and like all season there has been so little player movement. Are you guys expecting anything, or do you think it's going to pick up, or do you think this is just it? It's like there's not enough sellers, there's too many buyers, and we're not really going to see much.
I'm not expecting a whole lot. I think everybody, as has been said ad nauseum at this point, everyone expected the Thunder to be sellers, and they're not going to be by most optics. I would say they're succeeding, and Chris Paul, by all accounts, has been a really good presence in that locker room. I think they'd like to keep him around, make a push with what they've got, and then they still have a ton of draft assets, regardless of whether they want to sell. So I just sort of think it could be legitimately this quiet.
Yeah. I think it's probably going to stay this quiet too. Like we're saying, like it's pretty locked up in terms of the sellers that were supposed to be sellers aren't going to be sellers, and everybody else is buyers pretty much. So you only really have a couple teams that are selling, and are those pieces worth anything? I think it stays pretty much like this, unless there's one larger move, probably by an upper echelon team that gets all the other teams panicked, and then you might see sort of an accumulating snowball effect.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I doubt there's going to be much going on.
It doesn't help that two of the teams at the top, the Lakers and the Clippers, have really crappy trade assets right now.
Yeah, they're locked into impossible positions.
Neither one of them can trade much in terms of picks, and that's what most of the sellers are going to want. Like, I think Chris Paul is probably gettable, but I do think he's crossed that mark where he's more valuable to the Thunder than he is to most of the teams that would be trading for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's peak value right now, I'd say.
Like, the one thing nobody really saw coming was him buying in on being a mentor to a young team, because he seemed like the guy who was dead set on getting a championship before he went out, and he just really seems to be enjoying what he's doing there. Like, every time I watch them, he seems to be really bought in on that team. The young guys seem to be bought in on playing with him. Him and Shea fit fantastic together. And then I keep looking around the league and thinking, like, where do you get a seller from? And the Spurs maybe would sell, but is anybody that high on, like, DeMar DeRozan or LaMarcus Aldridge?
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a busy trade deadline because I like player movement and I think it's fun, but also, I mean, we didn't really talk about the whole Kobe thing this week, but I also do think that one of the effects of that and the somber mood that it's put on the league as a whole is it might also tamp down the trade deadline. And I know that's not really where most people want to talk about the Kobe stuff, but it's, teams are going through a lot. Players are going through a lot right now. You don't really want to put a player through suddenly having to pick up and move his family in the middle of dealing with all of that.
Yeah, no, I hadn't even really given that much thought, but it makes sense that, everybody's so focused on what's been happening this past week that looking forward to this next week may not be, on even the back burner for a lot of these teams.
Yeah, like I thought Kuzma could have been one of the guys still that would get moved. But after hearing LeBron say, no, we're good, we have enough, and then the whole Kobe thing now, I feel like the Lakers, there's been a bunch of reports coming out saying the Lakers are more like a family than ever. They're all so close. I can't see them doing anything, honestly. I think they're going to stand pat for sure. And they were one of the teams that people were looking at. Like, Kuzma's a gettable guy. I'm not sure he is anymore.
Yeah. I can't see Rob Blinka messing with that locker room. Like, he was Kobe's agent.
Yeah. I could still see Derrick Rose moving.
Yeah.
I don't know what the Lakers send if they're really making a push for him. I'm not sure that it's actually happening. But
I
that
feel like,
would be the biggest name really that I could think of on the move.
I know Derrick.
yeah,
I know
like
Rose has been a lot better scoring this year, but are we sure he really helps a team that much?
I don't think he has to help a team drastically if he's going to the Lakers. But yeah, I don't know. So much of that is just people want him to be good again so badly that I think people don't want to investigate those numbers too closely. Um,
Like,
but yeah, I am a little bit skeptical because I can't believe that he's suddenly neutral or even really approaching neutral on defense. So yeah, I don't know.
I feel like the Lakers are also still waiting on the Darren Collison thing. Like, I think they're really hoping that comes through for them. It would just be so much easier than trying to make a move.
the Lakers and Clippers both, I think. On that.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I think a lot of teams still think in the back of their head that if it gets past the trade deadline and no trade materializes, that the Grizzlies are going to buy out Andre Iguodala, and I don't know that that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I wish he would just show up and play for him. Because it's obvious they're not as bad of a team, I think, as he thought they were going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And why not? I mean,
I have been told by people in Memphis that the team doesn't want him, even if he decided he wanted to play anymore.
Really?
I've been told that the team has just kind of said, like, their chemistry, it works right now. He decided he didn't want to be a part of it. They're good on that front.
That's interesting because vacuum-wise, I would love to see him sort of interacting with Brandon Clark because I think he could do a lot for him developmentally. They're not identical players, and I know people compare players to Iguodala all the time really poorly. But I do think there are enough sort of overlapping skill sets between Clark and Iguodala that could be a really interesting mentorship fit.
I think, like, that was what struck me about the interview he did on The Jump, was when he said, they asked him, what are you looking for in your next team? And he said, well, I want to mentor young players. I went, like, you're under contract with a team with three of the most interesting young players in the league. Sorry about that. Like, the Grizzlies in Morant, Jaren, and Brandon Clark have three fascinating young players who are all three really good. And if you just want to mentor young players, like, there's not very many better places to be.
Right.
And I don't know. The story that's been out for a while is he's not going to give any money back on a buyout. That's a big contract.
Yeah.
Even if it gets past the trade deadline and the options for the Grizzlies are buy him out or just let him go to free agency this summer, I don't really see what incentive they have to buy him out. Why do they want to help another team, especially when they might be a playoff team and he might sign with their first round opponent?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, Memphis is so much fun this year, though. Like, I love watching that team.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to the Bulls stuff just for a second here, though, I was looking at the standings, and you said you don't think they're a playoff team. They're only like 5 games out right now.
Yeah, no, I know. And that was kind of ticking through my head as I was saying that the 8th seed is in such a precarious position in that conference that I feel like I can never say they're truly out of the race. I can say that if they made the playoffs as an 8th seed, they would get swept soundly. They're just not. I mean, certainly they're not equipped to play the Bucks or whoever is the first seed. I'm assuming it's the Bucks. But they would get blown out by any of the 1 through 7 teams, if you ask me. There's so much wrong with the way that they conduct themselves on the court that it would be a nightmare. They're a regular season team that can create illusory results, but I don't think they're a team that could hold up in like an actual playoff environment because of how reliant they are on almost gimmicks. I would even go as far as to say that they're a very solvable equation if you want to take them as a playoff team.
I mean, the thing is, the team ahead of them right now is Orlando, and Orlando has looked lately like they very much do not have it figured out, and they're a team that I could see Orlando kind of breaking it up at the deadline if they had an interesting option.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think shipping AG should be on their minds, but I don't know where he goes. I don't know who buys him, and I don't know how much he costs.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't see how Gordon fits with their future there, assuming that Isaac's their central piece, which you have to assume this.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see Gordon and Isaac fitting together all that well. I think they still believe in Mobamba. He's shown some signs this year. Um, I don't know what that says about Vucevic, who they just gave a whole pile of money to.
Yeah.
Like, Orlando's is another team. And, like, I think Orlando has a pretty good front office. Jeff Weltman always struck me as somebody who knew what he was doing when he was with the Raptors.
Mm-hmm.
So they're an interesting team to watch for me this week because if they do decide to blow it up, that 8th seed becomes wide open in the East. That throws the collar back into flux, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping they don't decide to do it again for selfish reasons. But yeah, I mean, like you said, the Bulls aren't truly out of it, but if they make the playoffs, they're still practically out of it.
Yeah, I mean, nobody is winning a first round series against Milwaukee that's going to play Milwaukee in the first round. That is going to be a 4-game series.
Yep.
The Bucks are terrifying, and I really want the Raptors to be in the 2 seed just so we can avoid them as long as possible.
Totally fair. Hey, maybe Washington will really they'll crank it up to 150 and sneak in as the 8th seed. That would be fun.
Watching the Bucks average 180 points for 4 games.
Yes, sir.
Giannis would be like, he'd play, 22 minutes and average 45 points or something?
Yeah, I mean, he'd have a Wilt series. It would be incredible.
Just before we finish here, I want to touch on some Raptors news that came across today with Josh. Josh, you've been around the team a lot recently. And obviously we all saw the Norm news that just hit today. And, indefinitely out with a fractured finger. And I don't know what to say about the Raptors' injury luck this year, but this run they've been on lately, like, Norm has been a huge part of it. His offensive numbers have really dialed up. He's having the best stretch of basketball this season. But more importantly, like, they have struggled to find offensive points this season. Gasol's already out. Now they're missing Norm.
Yeah, it sucks. I mean, I think like part of it is why he's so good is so like obviously the main change here has come from finishing at the rim. Like that's where he's so much better. And I think we talked about this a little bit last week. He's just so much better there, but he's better there because he's getting out in transition so much. And so he's finishing in transition a lot of the time. Like in the half court, he's still better than he was, but not nearly the finisher he is in almost every other situation. So the problem with the Raptors is not that they can't get stops. They can get stops almost whenever they want. There was so many games like this season where they've had like they're just getting stops down the stretch over and over, which seems like the hard part, and then they go to the other end, they just can't capitalize. And it was so frustrating to watch. And Norm has been an antidote for that because if you're getting stops, you're getting out in transition, and you get Norm on the move where the defense is already moving, and that or he's got one guy in front of him. At this point, he's pretty much a bucket. Like he's going to score, and that helps them so much in those situations. And not having him, that becomes a lot harder to score. And it's already the Raptors' greatest weakness is just finding different ways to score because they don't have that many creators, and it's always been the most difficult in the half court and remains that way. But that's why the Raptors have such an emphasis on getting out on the break, on pushing the ball. Kyle Lowry does it all the time. Fred does it. So like that's what he provides the team, and he's become really, really good at it. He knows what he needs to do. His confidence level is at an all-time high. On top of that, he's shooting 40% from three. He was doing that last year as well. He's been great. So he's fit into the plan, and he's maximized himself there. And it sucks because this is the best he's ever played. So, you know.
The first question I got when the news hit was somebody asked me, like, where do the Raptors fill the minutes? And everybody's concern right away is, well, does this mean more Patrick McCaw? I don't think it means more Patrick McCaw. He's already playing 20 minutes again. You can't, increase his minutes that much.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
I don't want to go there. I think it probably means a restoration of Terrence Davis to a full spot in the rotation, where his minutes sometimes go a lot since McCaw's back. Like he only played 7 minutes the other night, and I don't think you'll see that from him while Norm is out. What I would like to see is I would like to see Matt Thomas be given an opportunity to fill a lot of those minutes, because I think, he can't replace Norm in transition, but he can replace Norm's floor spacing, and that's important.
Yeah, and I mean, if he's out on the wing, like, if he's out running the floor and finds himself open heading to the corner, you hit him on the wing, like, pretty good chance he makes that shot. So, and he's still useful for sure. I mean, he's not Norm, but and especially on defense too, although he tries. Yep. But like, I could see him getting minutes. I'd like Davis to get more minutes. I like Davis as much as pretty much anybody else. So I enjoy watching him, even the mistakes he makes. I enjoy watching it because he's learning and growing, and he's already come so far in like half a season. So.
And he's shooting like 40% from 3 himself.
Yeah. He's a catch and shoot sniper, man. If he's like off the ball, he's so good off the ball. You put him with other creators around him. You put him in that Norm spot in like a starting unit or something similar to that, where you have at least a couple creators around him, and he's everywhere. He's so good in that role. And obviously the Raptors would like him to be able to do more on the ball and have asked him to do more on the ball because they have to. But like even at some of the practices I was at early on, and reporters were asking Nurse, like, is this going to be a thing? Like, would you enjoy having Davis on the ball more? Like, are we going to see that? And he was so hesitant because he knows how good Davis is off the ball. And he was like, well, we'd really like to get him kind of just comfortable first in the offense. And he seems to be very good at doing these things. And so we'd like to emphasize these things. But, they've kind of done a mix and match of both. But when he's been in that position, he's been really, really good.
I just love his confidence for an undrafted rookie. Like, he plays like a guy who knows he can play with anybody in the league. And,
Van Fleet levels.
Yep. I mean, the good news for Raptors fans is Pascal Siakam looks like he's back in form. Kyle Lowry looks like he's in full form right now. And those guys are playing like they are. It makes it a lot easier on everybody around them.
Yeah.
So, as long as we don't see too much full bench, I don't think the Norman Powell injury is going to sink the ship. But I mostly say that because I thought a lot of the earlier injuries this season were going to get the Raptors in trouble, and like they just haven't. Nick Nurse seems to always have a way to figure it out.
Yeah, he's been great. I mean, I always feel like I'm being a homer when I talk about stuff like this, but I mean, he's got to be in a top 3, at least top 5 Coach of the Year conversation. He's been great. I mean, Spoelstra's got to be up there. Bud's got to be up there. Vogel too. What he's doing is, I think, underrated because he's got superstars. But I think he's got to be in that conversation because the Raptors' year has just been like it's so annoying. I was talking about this with Blake Murphy not long ago. Because you're trying to figure out stuff there's always new angles to write about, but it's so difficult to write about things statistically because there's no big sample sizes. Everything is like so small that you're like, well, this might be something. I have no idea. Brutal.
Yeah. No, I was looking at lineup numbers for something to write the other day, and it's like the Raptors have like 3 lineups that have played more than 60 minutes.
Yeah.
Jeez.
It's just like everything is small sample size theater, and you want to get excited when you see really good numbers. Like, I was talking last week about the big lineup, which now is, I mean, until Marc Gasol is back, that's on hold. But
And everyone's super excited about the Fred plus bench lineup, but they're playing a bunch of not so great teams right now that it's succeeding against. And how would that fare against better defenses? I don't know because we haven't seen it.
Yeah, I'm just happy the Bulls game tomorrow being an afternoon game against Chicago, who has randomly thrown up ridiculous performances against the Raptors sometimes in the past. I'm glad that one doesn't matter for whether Nurse coaches the All-Star game. Because
I'm just jealous sitting here listening to you guys talk about it, honestly. Like, listening to, we have this coach and he like tries a lot of different stuff. Yeah, we have like a really deep bench and all this stuff. Man, I can't even imagine what that's like.
Zach Levine's probably going to put up like 50 tomorrow, and we're going to be sitting there and going, well, I don't know how to explain that one. It happens.
Yeah. The nice thing about Levine, though, versus like when Jimmy Butler would have his Raptors games, is that Levine will give you 50 back, too. So it's a very like one-for-one exchange, where Butler was like, I'll give you 50, you're going to get like 15.
The one I'll never forget is the one where like the Raptors were beating the Bulls really badly, and Butler was having a bad game. And then he had like a 30-point fourth quarter or something.
I was actually at the Windy City Bulls game when they played the 905, watching Van Vliet, I think. And they like announced the Bulls score like midway through the third quarter, and I was like, oh my gosh, like we're gonna get smoked. We were losing to the 905 too at the time, so I was like, this is just an overall bad day. And I remember getting back in my car to drive home from Hoffman Estates, and it was like the last 2 minutes or whatever of the game, and I was like, I can't believe any of this is happening. And that was when Jimmy Butler became my favorite player.
Wow.
Yeah, he broke our hearts a lot.
Yeah.
He's good, man. Yeah.
So, no, I hope things get better for you and for Bulls fans, because like it feels like a lot of Bulls fans now are just kind of in a place where you guys seem like you're a really beat down fan base by the organizational mistakes, and I have empathy for that, because as great as this Masai era has been for the Raptors, it hasn't always been like this. We know what it's like to cheer for a team that's not on that level. So I hope you guys get to experience some organizational success again soon.
One day. You know, once Cade Cunningham's in a Chicago Bulls jersey, it's all going to be worth it. Until then, we struggle with hope that something greater is coming down the line.
Well, I appreciate you having you coming on the show today and talking through some of your Bulls issues and the All-Star stuff. I thought we'd spend more time on the All-Star stuff, but honestly, it's not that much to talk about when you start actually talking about it. It's a couple of guys who are upset. I mean, I just think players, when they don't make the All-Star game and they think they should, and they get that question, they should just say, I'm going to take this as motivation to be better next year, and let the question go.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So, but thank you for coming on. Thank you for chatting with us today, and good luck with the Raptors-Bulls game tomorrow.
Thank you. I'll tweet out my list of the 15 or however many guys are had a better season than Levine. So if anybody's curious, that's where you can find it.
Do you have anything else you want to plug today?
No, nothing at all.
Nothing at all right now? Okay.
That's about it. It was great coming on today, though. I appreciate you guys letting me talk it out. And hey, I hope I can come back sometime.
If the Bulls win the lottery, we'll have you on so you could,
Oh, sure. It'll sound a lot different than today. I promise you that.
Actually, I don't know if you want to win this lottery.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, if we can put me on hold until, May of 2021, and then we can talk.
Anything you want to plug today, Josh? I know you said on Twitter you just finished your internship with Sportsnet.
Yeah, just finished. It was awesome, great experience. Met a lot of really cool people. Got to write some cool stuff. Sounds like I will continue to get to write some cool stuff. So yeah, I'm back to being a free agent, which is kind of neat. So you'll see my stuff probably, I don't know, all over the place. I'm sure Raptors will be hosting some stuff again of mine, if they will have me, of course. And yeah, no, nothing else really to plug. It's cool to get to meet. I think Will's the first person that we've had on the show that I did not know at all beforehand. So this was kind of neat. It was a good conversation.
Sweet.
And for myself, I write at Raptors Republic. This is my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Burl, for people who are watching on YouTube. And tonight at 5 o'clock my time, so 7 o'clock Eastern time, I'll be on Fan 590 to talk Raptors for a few minutes.
Nice.
So, thank you to everybody listening on Twitch or YouTube. Appreciate you guys giving us the time.